I grew up in a small town in rural America, on a property that felt safe most of the time, but only because nothing ever really happened there. We were about 2 miles out of town at the very end of a dead-end dirt road. Nobody came by unless they meant to, and most nights it was so still outside you could hear the power lines buzzing across the fields. One night, when I was about 12, I was watching TV in the living room. The house was quiet except for the low sound of the show I was glued to. Suddenly, my 2 older brothers came rushing down the stairs. Both of them were big guys, college-aged, not easily rattled, but they looked dead serious. "Did you hear that?" one of them asked me. I hadn't. I shook my head. They told me they heard footsteps outside, slow, heavy ones, followed by 2 voices whispering right outside the wall of their room. Their plan was simple. I'd stay inside and lock the door while they rushed out opposite sides of the house, circle around, and catch whoever was there. The second they flung the front door open, the night air rushed in and they bolted into the darkness. As soon as they left, the silence felt unnatural. Not just quiet, heavy, like even the insects had gone silent. That's when I heard it. Bang! Something slammed against the side of the house, so hard that a picture frame rattled on the wall. I jumped out of my seat, heart pounding. I pressed myself against the window, terrified, trying to spot where it came from. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, and for half a second, I thought I saw another faint outline standing just behind me. When I whipped around, no one was there. Then came the second shock. From the far end of the house, there were running footsteps, fast, frantic. Not my brothers. Too light, too quick, and they stopped dead just beneath the porch. I held my breath, frozen. And that's when I heard it, a low whisper right under the window. Wait. My skin crawled. I backed away from the glass, too afraid to move, convinced if I peeked again, I'd see a face staring back at me. Seconds later, my brothers came back around the corner, flashlights darting into the trees. But of course, they found nothing. Whoever it was had already melted back into the woods. Both of them swore they'd heard the whispers upstairs, plain as day. And after what I'd just experienced, I believed them. But the part that unsettles me most isn't what we heard. It's what we didn't see. Because if those whispers were that close to the wall, if those footsteps stopped just under my window, then someone was standing there in the dark, close enough to see me sitting inside. Close enough to leave their breath on the glass. And out there, once you step a few feet into the woods, you vanish. Whoever it was could have stayed hidden, watching us until dawn. My dad used to rent a house way out in the middle of nowhere. I'm talking a solid 45 minutes to the nearest town and another 15 just to get to the closest neighbor. At night, when you stepped outside, the silence felt almost oppressive. No passing cars, no porch lights from a distance, just pitch black woods and the occasional rustle of animals. On the property were several pheasant enclosures that belonged to the landowner. My dad didn't have to look after them. He just agreed to call the guy if something looked off. They'd been friends since high school, so it was no big deal. One morning, though, my dad noticed something horribly wrong. The largest enclosure, the one furthest from the house, was filled with silence. Normally, you'd hear the birds fluttering, pecking around, making little noises. But this time, nothing. When he got closer, he froze. Every single bird, over 50 of them, lay dead inside. The ground was a mess of feathers and blood. Not a single one had been eaten or dragged off, which ruled out coyotes or foxes. It wasn't predation. It looked like a massacre. The owner came by immediately, just as disturbed as my dad. Luckily, he had cameras set up around the enclosures. So they went inside the house, pulled up the footage, and sat down to watch. What they saw still unsettles me when I think about it. Around 2 in the morning, the motion sensor clicked on. Out of the woods, a man wandered onto the property. He wasn't carrying a gun or any hunting gear, just a knife and a headlamp strapped to his forehead, casting this eerie cone of light across the enclosure. He never approached the house, never even looked toward it. He went straight to the far pen, crawled under the fence, and methodically started catching each bird. One by one, he stabbed them. No hosetaschen, no signs of anger or frenzy, just slow, deliberate movements like he was working through some kind of ritual. The worst part? He stayed there for hours. Every so often he'd stop, stand perfectly still, and lift his head toward the camera, that beam of light flaring directly into the lens. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't even making a face. He just stood there, breathing, as if he knew someone would watch this later. When the owner fast-forwarded through the tape, the man was there until dawn, catching, stabbing, arranging the bodies into little clusters before moving to the next. Then, just as casually as he'd come, he walked back into the woods and disappeared. That night, when my dad replayed the scene in his head, he heard something outside. Bang! Something slammed against the back porch. He grabbed his gun and rushed to the door, only to find nothing. No animals. No footprints in the dirt. Just silence. He didn't let us stay there after that. For weeks, we lived with our mom while he slept alone in the house, gun by his bed, lights left on. The property owner installed alarms, floodlights, even bought a couple of big guard dogs. During the day, they were friendly, wagging their tails at anyone who approached. But at night, they'd growl and bark at the woods, sometimes for hours, like they sensed something still lurking out there. And here's the part that really stuck with me. That man was never caught. The footage was handed to the police, they investigated, but it went nowhere. No identification, no leads, nothing. Whoever he was, he knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't come for the house. He didn't steal a thing. He just wanted to kill. And sometimes I wonder, if he hadn't stopped at the birds, if he decided to walk another 50 yards toward the house instead, what would have happened to my dad that night? I grew up on a ranch in rural California, in this small, weathered ranch house that had been there long before we moved in. It was the kind of place built for hot summers. Wide windows everywhere, most of the rooms opening into a single central living room. Cozy in the day, but at night, all those dark windows turned into black mirrors. You couldn't see out. You just had to wonder if someone was standing on the other side, looking in. One night when I was about 14, I was sitting on the couch in that living room doing homework. My younger brother, who was 11, sat near the old wood stove scribbling in his notebook. My mom had gone out to run an errand, so it was just the two of us. The house was quiet, warm, and well lit inside. But outside, beyond the windows, it was absolute black. Out there, miles of open ranch land, no streetlights, no neighbors close by. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, not the light patter of an animal. These were heavy, deliberate steps coming up the mud porch toward the front door. I froze, listening. My heart started pounding because I hadn't heard a car. Out here, you could hear engines from far off, see headlights sweeping across the windows before anyone even pulled into the driveway. But there had been nothing, just silence. The footsteps stopped at the door, and then nothing. No knock, no voice, just someone standing there. I felt the blood drain from my face. I wanted to whisper to my brother, but the house was so quiet that even the smallest sound would carry. Whoever was outside wouldn't know we were in here. The worst part? That door was always unlocked. All they had to do was turn the knob. Every option in my head felt dangerous. If I went to the kitchen for a knife, they'd see me through the window in the door. If I tried to hide, they'd know exactly where we'd gone. The house was too small, too open. So I stayed frozen, pretending I hadn't noticed. Then, without warning, top, 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 something rapped against the glass of one of the side windows. My brother looked up at me, wide-eyed. Neither of us moved. The tapping stopped, replaced by faint crunching in the dirt outside, footsteps circling slowly, like whoever it was testing the house. Checking windows, listening, and then silence again. Minutes crawled by, every second stretching longer than the last. My heart was racing so hard I thought whoever it was might hear it through the wall. But eventually, nothing else happened. The footsteps stopped. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe my brain was just making things up. Almost 20 minutes later, relief finally hit me. Through the window, I saw the sweep of headlights coming up the drive. My mom's car. I bolted outside to greet her, ready to spill everything. But before I could say a word, she frowned at me and asked, "Who left the water on?" My stomach dropped. In our front yard was this odd, old water spigot. A pipe that stuck up about waist high, with a faucet facing upward. My brother and I used to treat it like a fountain, drinking from it or turning it on to play under in the summer. When my mom pulled in, that spigot was gushing full blast. Water was shooting several feet into the air, soaking the dirt below. My brother and I had been inside the whole time. Nobody else was supposed to be there. Whoever had stood on our porch, whoever had walked around our windows, tapping the glass, they hadn't just watched us. They'd gone into the yard. They turned on the water just to make sure we knew that they were there, knew that they could have come inside if they wanted. And they wanted us to remember it.